Seahawks in sole possession of first place in the NFC West, and they build on that with a win over the Jets. Kevin, I got to be honest, I wasn't entirely sure they were going to beat the Jets on Sunday. Tell me about this game.
It shouldn't have been close. I'm surprised. I think you guys probably seen the stat by now. The Jets are like the first team in history to be favored in 9 of the first 12 games and be this bad. So I think that there's probably a good team hiding somewhere in New Jersey, but we haven't seen it, and we didn't see it on Sunday. It's not like the Jets played some great game. They had good individual performances. I think the level of talent that Seattle has is going to win them games like this. With Leonard Williams, obviously, like we've seen what Witherspoon's been able to do the last couple of weeks. We've been able to see, everything but the offensive line has kind of been humming. The play calling at the goal line needs to be addressed. The short yardage situation need to be addressed. But I think Seattle is, in my opinion, should be favored in the NFC West going forward. I think that Kyler Murray is unbelievable. I think that he could play like an MVP, but Mike McDonald's better coach than Jonathan Gannon. The roster talent in Seattle is better than the roster talent in Arizona. And so, there's some sloppiness that really, really concerned me. But as we say in college football, win your clunkers, and that's what Seattle's been able to do.
What do you think is the strength of this team right now? Because we started the season off with the offense flying high, kind of carrying this thing. They simmered down a bit. Now the defense is kind of doing their thing. Yeah. How do you view this team when it comes to strength and weaknesses?
It's not the offensive line lately, I'll tell you that much. I saw a stat from Next Gen Stats that Geno Smith has faced pressure in under 2.5 seconds on 20% of his dropbacks. That's the third worst in the league.
Goodness.
So there's immediate pressure in his face 1 out of every 5 times, basically. That's really bad. And you saw that a little bit with McDonald beating Charles Cross. Like there's some plays there where Geno just has no chance. That's got to be addressed. That's a John Schneider priority to me. But you look at, first of all, that Geno is still really good, especially when he doesn't have guys in his face. But to me, it's the defense. To me, it's the talent level there. It is, it's not what it's going to be a decade ago, but Seattle's always going to have a defensive floor. I saw a stat that the Seahawks and the Steelers are the only 2 teams that have reached 7 wins in 15 consecutive years. Steelers have done it 21 times. But the reason the Seahawks are able to do that is because of the defensive floor that they have and the credibility and how they're coached and how they draft and all that stuff. So they're a fast, physical defense. People were saying, well, this was the best defender in the league a couple weeks ago. Leonard Williams, obviously, is really, really good. So to me, the identity is going to be the defense so the offensive line can figure it out. And also the short yardage stuff. Like the situational football on the offensive side of the ball has been disappointing in the last month or so.
Do you see that as an offensive line issue, a talent issue, or as a play calling issue?
Yes.
Right. I'm with you, Kevin.
No, if you can't gain a yard, it's because of the offensive line, right? And I do think they got a little too cute play calling. Why were they passing? Why are they taking sacks? Why are they taking plays that take too long to develop? Like all that stuff. I think that part of that is play calling. But if you cannot gain a yard, and listen, they had a center who retired midseason. Like that's not normal. But if you cannot gain a yard, it's an interior offensive line problem. That to me is pretty black and white.
I need you to pull out the crystal ball, okay? I'm looking at this division. The Niners are banged up. They're getting old. The Rams are, you can never count them out, but now the Cardinals are getting better, and the Seahawks are a team that seems like they're on the rise. What do you think the future of this division looks like? It's been dominated by the Niners for the past, 4 or 5 seasons. Do you feel and see a change coming, and where do you see that change?
Yeah, I definitely see a change coming because when you have an old, expensive roster, things devolve pretty quickly. I'm not going to be stupid enough to say that the Niners window is closing because Kyle Shanahan, if you look at like yards per attempt in history, half of the best quarterbacks statistically are Kyle Shanahan quarterbacks because of what his offense is able to do. But you start looking around at the roster and you say these are some old guys who cost a lot of money. So you have to hit in the draft. You have to get these young guys coming in. What happens? I don't know what the heck you do with Brock Purdy, where people were thinking he was a $60 million a year quarterback. What are you going to do team building wise when Brock freaking Purdy, who I don't think is particularly great, is making $60 million? I just don't know from a team building standpoint what you do there. I think that the thing with the NFC West and what makes it so hard to predict is that everybody's got something to sell. Like everybody's got an optimistic kind of bent that you can take there. The Cardinals have Kyler Murray, who's really good, who's able to escape pressure and create things when he's healthy. Jonathan Gannon's maybe been a little bit of a better coach than I thought he was going to be 2 years ago. The Rams have Sean McVay. Matthew Stafford is still able to play good ball when he's healthy. And the Seahawks have a really, really good coach in Mike Macdonald. They've got those defensive pieces, and they've got a lot of talent. I think it's going to improve. So to me, I'm always going to default to Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan being able to figure it out. If you're asking who's going to win the division the most over the next 10 years, I'm probably going to take those two guys. But I think everybody, it's not like there's no kind of lost cause here. There's no team in the division where I'm going to say, okay, they're done for the next decade. It's not going to happen. I just know there's going to be more parity than there has been in that division because the advantage the Niners have is going away.
One, I don't want to say a strict advantage because we had a ton of respect for Pete Carroll here, and he also brought this team its first Lombardi. But one nice advantage that the 49ers have always had is coaching and great play calling. Same with Sean McVay, who's an excellent coach and maybe an even better coach and leader of men than he is a play caller. Doesn't really get credit for that side of his game. Is there something you've come to really appreciate about what successful coaching looks like? I mean, I ask because we recently saw Matt Eberflus fired in Chicago. I was just having a conversation with our producer Curtis about Ryan Day for Ohio State. So just the topics of coaching have been fascinating to me. Is there anything you've come to learn or really appreciate about the position?
I have come to learn that Matt Eberflus was a very bad coach. And what's funny about it, guys, is the Seahawks did not have this with Pete Carroll. The Seahawks maybe even cut bait a year early on Pete Carroll. But to me, I think that the biggest process mistake the Bears made, first of all, why were you hiring the guy in the first place? Eberflus was not coming off a vintage season in Indianapolis. Like, it didn't make much sense. I didn't see a lot of advantages that he gave the team. It was almost the opposite of Mike Macdonald. Mike Macdonald was a dynamic young coach who was really doing special things in Baltimore. If you sit with Mike Macdonald, I'm sure you guys have been in a room with him. He's dynamic. He understands the game. And everything is thought out, and you learn something every time you ask him a question. I don't know if he's like that in press conferences, but he was certainly like that in Baltimore. As I said, I haven't been out to Seattle in the last year, so I haven't been able to talk to him as Seahawks coach. But I think that the biggest process mistake the Bears made, guys, was hope is not a strategy, and he didn't show anything in those 2 years to justify the third year, and they brought him back anyway and said, we believe. I always think that a team should look at their situation every year and say, if we were doing this over right now, who would be the coach? Who would be the GM? And if the answer is not Matt Eberflus and Ryan Poles, then change it. Like there's that old Warren Buffett line I think about a lot where when he's trying to invest in a business, he says, if the business was invented today, would it look like this? And that's kind of how I view teams with coaches, is if you were hiring a coach right now, would it be the coach that you have right there, right? And if it's not, switch him out. And so to me, I would be a little more ruthless as far as that goes. I wouldn't bring guys back for a third year if they show nothing in the first 2 years. And I think that there's just different ways. There's different coaches that are fits for different teams. I think Mike Vrabel, who I spent a lot of time with in Nashville 2 years ago, is an awesome culture guy. He understands locker rooms and how they should operate. I think he's probably best for a veteran team and not a young team because of how he's able to communicate with veterans and kind of unlock those guys and get them to play. To me, I think that I've become more humble as far as understanding that there's many different ways to be a good coach. I think maybe 5 years ago it was, you just have to hire a Sean McVay type. Well, eventually you're going to hire the ninth best Sean McVay type, and it's going to be diminishing returns. There's a lot of ways to have a successful football staff, and that's the thing I've learned.
It seems like the coaching styles and stuff come in waves, right? One person has success, you try to duplicate that. I think that happens at the quarterback position as well. And I'm looking at the quarterbacks. And I'm biased. I feel like I grew up in a great era. Drew Brees, Ben Roethlisberger, Tom Brady. But when I look at the quarterbacks who are established now and the quarterbacks who are on the rise, I get optimistic again, especially watching Bo Nix and seeing how the way he's developed. Jaden Daniels, of course, and the guys at the top with Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson. Where is the state of the quarterback union these days? What do the top dogs feel like to you? And then talk to me about these young guys.
It's a lot better than people think it is. I mean, we're never going to get a generation, as you just mentioned, of the Brees, Brady's, Roethlisberger's Manning's. I mean, part of the thing is the collective bargaining agreement in 2011 limited practice time, limited training camp time, limited two-a-days. And what those guys were able to get was an unbelievable education where they basically got unlimited practice for the first 5-6 years in the NFL. And then on the back end, they were able to get their bodies preserved because of the rule changes, right? Like they came in at the exact right time, and all of a sudden you got Drew Brees passing for 700 million yards in his career. That's never going to happen again. But you look at the way the teams are able to manage quarterbacks right now. Bryce Young looking like a legitimate NFL player, which nobody thought would be possible a month ago. Anthony Richardson coming in. I think there's a lot of different ways to develop a quarterback now. And, obviously, I thought C.J. Stroud was going to take a huge leap this year. He hasn't. Part of that's offensive line. Part of that's play calling. Part of that's how they call the protection. There's a lot of things going into that. And so I think there's going to be more parity going forward as far as quarterbacks. And Mahomes is always going to be at the top. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson are always going to be there. But that to me is my first cut. And I would put Joe Burrow right at the edge there. Joe Burrow, I mean, unbelievably, I saw a thing the other day about the guys who have Joe Burrow's stats historically, they're always like 9-3 at this point. Joe Burrow's 4-8. That's just unfortunate timing with how bad the Bengals defense is and some of the coaching staff issues and the roster and all that stuff. But I think the young quarterbacks, I think you can maximize them with play calling. You can maximize them with giving them easy answers to the test. That's why what's happening in Chicago is so frustrating to me, is because the first 10 weeks, everything was hard with Chicago. They were making Caleb Williams do things he wasn't comfortable with. I've seen way more confidence with him over the past 2 weeks under Thomas Brown because he's able to be the athlete he wants to be. He's able to have the confidence. He's able to understand the timing of when he can take a step to his left because there's pressure in his face or whatever. So I think, to me, it's going to be an era where the floor is much higher on quarterbacks than we think. And I think the quarterback developmental crisis and all the stuff we talk about, I think it's real. But I also think it's pretty easy to solve those problems. Just get a guy get a coach who's able to maximize the quarterbacks and get a quarterback who can do a lot of things that you want to do. I think the Richardson-Young thing is so interesting to me because going forward now, when a guy gets benched or when they say, hey, we're going to take a reset button for 3 weeks, there's proof of concept now where it's like, hey, guys, not every quarterback's going to come into this league looking like C.J. Stroud and looking like a superstar. Some of these guys are going to take longer. I think patience is going to do well for everybody.
All right, well, speaking of some of these quarterbacks, you mentioned Josh Allen, who had a passing and receiving touchdown on the same play. Thank you, Josh, for helping me win fantasy this week. Also, Lamar, obviously. We've all been talking about Saquon, too. Who's your front runner for MVP right now?
It's a two-horse race. I'm going to go. I'm going to go with Josh Allen right now, but Saquon is the only guy who can steal it to me. I think that I saw the stats the other day. Saquon is basically like on par with some of the all-time greats as far as yardage through 12 games. I think if the tush push was never invented or Jalen Hurts couldn't run the ball, I think
right.
Saquon would be running away from it.
He'd have 20 touchdowns.
At least, I think there are 9 instances, I think, at least, where he's gone down at the 1 yard line. I think there may be more because that might be two weeks old. And so that's brutal. But I think we as a football media can move beyond touchdowns. We can say yardage, we can say impact. Also, we've seen what this offense looks like when they don't have Saquon Barkley. They had no answers this time last year, none. And the blitz was killing them, all of the stuff. And so over a 12-month period, we've seen how much Saquon Barkley has meant to this franchise. And so I'm giving it to Josh Allen right now just because of how much he had to do this year as far as the roster took a step back. They had a bunch of cap problems, new offensive line, new receivers, all that stuff. He's gotten better. So I'm going him for MVP right now, but Saquon is right there with the chance to steal it.
Check out This Is Football from Kevin Clark at ByKevinClark on X.com. Thanks so much, Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin.